I still remember the exact moment my world crumbled around me. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was knitting a special scarf for Jessica's graduation. Blue and white, her school colors. The phone rang, and I smiled, seeing my granddaughter's name on the caller ID. Grandma Eleanor? Jessica's voice was oddly formal. Not the warm, excited tone I expected from a girl about to graduate medical school. Yes, sweetheart. I was just working on your graduation gift. A pause. Then, about graduation, I think it would be better if you didn't come. My fingers froze mid-stitch. What do you mean? It's just. Another pause. Derek's parents will be there. They're really important people in the medical community. His father sits on the hospital board and you're worried I'll embarrass you. I finished. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. My voice barely a whisper. No, it's not like that, Jessica said quickly, but her tone betrayed her. It's just that you're a bit old-fashioned. Your clothes and the way you talk about your nursing days. It doesn't really fit with the image. I closed my eyes, feeling the sting of tears. Mom agrees, Jessica added, as if her mother's approval made this betrayal more acceptable. She thinks it would be better for everyone if you just stayed home. Diana. My own daughter thought I was an embarrassment too. The pain deepened, cutting like a surgeon's knife, precise and devastating. I understand, I said, though I didn't. How could I understand being erased by the very people I loved most? Thanks, Grandma. I knew you'd get it. I'll call you after. Okay, maybe come visit you next weekend. After she hung up, I sat motionless for over an hour, the half-finished scarf still in my lap. 50 years of nursing, of saving lives, of working double shifts to put my daughter through college, of babysitting Jessica while Diana and Richard built their careers, of contributing to Jessica's medical school tuition from my modest pension. All of that, and I was still not good enough to sit in an auditorium and watch my granddaughter graduate. The next day, Diana called. I hoped she might contradict Jessica's request, but instead, she reinforced it. Mom, you know how these things work, she said with that condescending tone she'd developed after marrying Richard. Derek's family is very influential. His father could secure Jessica a residency at the best hospital in the country. And I would ruin that by being there? I asked quietly. Don't be dramatic. It's just that you never really fit in with that crowd. You don't understand how to speak to people of their caliber. People of their caliber. As if my decades helping the sick and vulnerable counted for nothing because I hadn't done it in designer clothes or with the right accent. Diana, I helped, pay for her education, and we're grateful, Mom. But this is about Jessica's future. Surely you want what's best for her? That's always been the trap, hasn't it? If I argued I didn't want what was best for Jessica. If I insisted on attending, I was selfish, putting my feelings above her prospects. So I stayed silent and agreed not to attend, feeling the weight of invisibility crushing me. After hanging up, I went to my bedroom closet and pulled out the dress I'd bought for the occasion. Nothing fancy, just a simple blue dress with a matching jacket. I'd spent weeks looking for something appropriate that wouldn't embarrass them. Now it would hang there, unworn, like the parts of myself I was expected to hide. The day of Jessica's graduation, I sat alone in my small house, surrounded by albums that chronicled a different time. When Jessica would proudly introduce me to her friends, when she'd ask me to tell stories about my nursing career, when she'd say she wanted to be just like me when she grew up. The doorbell rang at 3 p.m., exactly when the ceremony would be ending. I opened it to find Martha, an old colleague from my nursing days, standing there with a strange expression on her face. I thought you were going to be at the graduation, she said, stepping inside. My nephew graduated today, too. I wasn't feeling well, I lied, the words bitter on my tongue. Martha gave me a look that said she knew better. We'd worked together for 30 years. She could read me like a patient chart. Eleanor, I heard something today that I think you should know. She hesitated, which wasn't like Martha at all. She'd never been one to mince words, especially not with me. Jessica gave a speech, thanking people who inspired her medical career. I felt a small flutter of hope. Perhaps, even in my absence, Jessica had acknowledged me. She mentioned her grandmother, Martha continued, watching me carefully, a pioneering female doctor who sadly passed away several years ago. She said this grandmother had been her inspiration to pursue medicine. The room seemed to tilt. But I'm not dead, I whispered, and I was never a doctor. I know, Martha said gently, taking my hand. That's why I came straight here. Eleanor, she didn't just exclude you from the ceremony. She's created a fictional grandmother to replace you. I sank into my chair, the final piece of my heart shattering. It wasn't enough that they were ashamed of my presence. They were ashamed of my very existence. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something important. This wasn't just about a graduation ceremony. This was about whether I would allow myself to be erased from my own family's story. For the first time in my life, I decided that maybe it was time to write my own ending. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The granddaughter I had helped raise had not only rejected me, but replaced me with a fictional version she found more acceptable. As dawn broke, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, where a lifetime of family memories had unfolded. This table had witnessed it all. It was here that I'd sat with Diana as a little girl, helping with homework after my night shifts at county hospital. The same table where years later, I would sit with Jessica, bandaging her scraped knees and telling her stories about the patients whose lives I'd helped save. Patients like Mrs. Rodriguez, who came in with pneumonia so severe the doctors had given up. But I'd stayed with her through 3 nights, turning her every hour, clearing her lungs until she could breathe on her own again. Or the Thompson's baby, born 2 months early, who I'd fed with an eyedropper until he was strong enough to suckle. These weren't just stories to Jessica once, they were inspirations. "I want to help people like you do, Grandma," she'd said when she was 12, her eyes wide with admiration. When had that admiration turned to shame? I pulled out an old photo album from the shelf, dust dancing in the morning light as I opened it. Here was Diana at 18 in her graduation cap and gown, her arm around my shoulder. I was wearing a simple dress I'd sewn myself, my hair still dark then, my smile radiant with pride. I'd worked 2 jobs after Frank left us when Diana was just 3. He'd walked out one Sunday morning to get the newspaper and never returned, leaving me with a mortgage, a toddler, and a nursing certificate that became my lifeline. Back then, female nurses were paid barely enough to get by, let alone support a family. So I took on night shifts at the hospital and worked at Dr. Simmons' clinic during the day, while my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Keller, watched Diana. I flipped the page to find a photo of Diana's wedding to Richard. He came from money, old money, as they say. His father owned a successful medical supply company, and his mother was from a good family with connections to everyone who mattered in our town. From the beginning, I sensed Richard's parents merely tolerated me, the working-class nurse who didn't know the difference between a salad fork and a dinner fork. Diana changed after she married Richard. Suddenly, my home-cooked meals weren't good enough. My clothes weren't stylish enough. My stories weren't interesting enough. She started canceling our weekly lunches, always with a different excuse. When she became pregnant with Jessica, I hoped things would change, that she'd need her mother again, and for a while she did. Richard traveled frequently for business, and Diana struggled with the demands of a newborn. I'd drive over after my shift ended, still in my uniform, to rock Jessica to sleep while Diana showered or napped. I'd cook meals, do laundry, whatever was needed. I didn't mind. Jessica was the light of my life from the moment she was born. As Jessica grew, she spent many weekends with me while Diana and Richard attended social functions. We'd bake cookies, work in my small garden, or visit the park. When Jessica got older, she'd come with me to the senior center where I volunteered after retirement, helping me read to the residents or play checkers with Mr. Finley, who had no family of his own. When Jessica announced she wanted to be a doctor, I couldn't have been prouder. I'd started putting away a little money each month from my pension when she was born, just in case. By the time she was accepted to medical school, I had saved nearly $30,000. Not enough for full tuition, but enough to make a difference. "Grandma, you don't have to do this," Jessica had said when I handed her the check. "I want to," I told her. "You're going to be an amazing doctor, Jessica. You have both the brains and the heart for it." She'd hugged me then, tight and genuine. That was 5 years ago, before Derek, before she started spending holidays with his family instead of me, before she began referring to his father, Dr. Harrison, as her mentor, while mentioning my career less and less. The last time Jessica visited me about 3 months ago, she'd brought Derek along. He was handsome in that polished way with perfect teeth and carefully styled hair. He'd looked around my modest home with barely concealed disdain, picking up my nursing awards and setting them down without comment. When I shared a story about a difficult case from my days in the ER, he'd interrupted. "Well, doctors have to make the really tough calls," he'd said, as if my decades of experience counted for nothing because I didn't have MD after my name. Jessica had given me an apologetic look but said nothing to contradict him. I closed the album and put it away. Then I reached for my phone and did something I'd never done before. I called in sick to the community clinic where I still volunteered 3 days a week. In 47 years of nursing, I had never once called in when I wasn't actually ill. But today, I couldn't face anyone, not with the weight of my own invisibility pressing down on me. Instead, I did something else I rarely allowed myself. I cried. Not delicate tears, but gut-wrenching sobs that left me gasping for breath. I cried for the little girl who once looked at me with admiration. I cried for my daughter who had become a stranger. And I cried for myself, the woman who had given everything only to be erased when her existence became inconvenient. When the tears finally stopped, I made a decision. I wouldn't call Jessica or Diana. I wouldn't demand an explanation or beg for inclusion. If they wanted to pretend I was dead, or that I had been someone else entirely, I would give them the silence they seemed to crave. But I would not disappear. Not completely. Not yet. Graduation day arrived with painful clarity. The weather was perfect, sunny with a gentle breeze, as if even the sky was celebrating Jessica's achievement without me. I spent the morning cleaning my house with unusual thoroughness, scrubbing baseboards and reorganizing drawers, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind occupied. At noon, I found myself in front of my small jewelry box, fingers hovering over the silver caduceus pin I'd received after 30 years of service at County Hospital. I'd planned to give it to Jessica today, a symbol passing from one generation of medical professionals to the next. Now it would stay in its velvet-lined compartment, another piece of myself deemed unworthy of acknowledgement. The doorbell rang at 4:30 p.m. I opened it to find Martha again, this time with a program from the graduation clutched in her hand. "I thought you might want this," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. That was Martha, direct and unstoppable, a bulldozer in sensible shoes. I took the glossy program, my fingers trembling slightly. Jessica's name was there in the list of graduates, with honors noted beside it, pride and pain tangled in my chest. "There's something else," Martha said, pulling a small digital recorder from her purse. I recorded Jessica's speech. "Thought you should hear it yourself." I stared at the device. "I don't know if I can." "Eleanor Dawson," Martha said firmly, using the tone she'd used when we had difficult patients. "You've held the hands of dying people. You've worked 36-hour shifts during city emergencies. You can handle this." She pressed play. Jessica's voice filled my living room. "I want to thank those who inspired my journey in medicine. My parents, who always pushed me to excel. My boyfriend Derek, whose passion for medicine is contagious." Pause then. "And most importantly, my grandmother, Dr. Elizabeth Dawson, who was one of the first female cardiologists in this state. Though she passed away when I was young, her legacy inspired me to follow in her footsteps. I only wish she could be here today to see that her pioneering work as a woman in medicine lives on through me." Martha stopped the recording. The silence that followed was deafening. "Elizabeth was your mother's name," I said softly. Martha nodded. "I remember, but she wasn't a doctor." "No. My mother had been a seamstress who died of an untreated heart condition because we couldn't afford medical care. She's using my mother's name for her fictional grandmother." "There's more," Martha said hesitantly. After the ceremony, I overheard Jessica talking to Derek's parents. Mrs. Harrison mentioned how wonderful it was that Jessica came from good medical stock on her grandmother's side, even if her mother's side was less established. And Jessica didn't correct her? Martha shook her head. She smiled and thanked her for the opportunity. "I see." And I did see, with painful clarity. This wasn't just about one graduation ceremony. Jessica wasn't just hiding me. She was creating an entirely new lineage for herself. After Martha left, I pulled out my old nursing journals from the hall closet. I'd kept detailed accounts of my cases over the years, their conditions, treatments, outcomes, and the lessons I'd learned. Flipping through the yellowed pages, I was transported back. The premature twins who survived against all odds, the elderly man who'd squeezed my hand as he took his last breath, the teenage girl whose suicide attempt I'd helped thwart. These journals represented my legacy, not as prestigious as a doctor's perhaps, but real, honest, mine. I was still looking through them when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Through the window, I saw Jessica stepping out of her silver Audi, a graduation gift from Richard and Diana, no doubt. She was still wearing her graduation dress, a tasteful navy blue sheath that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Despite everything, my heart lifted at the sight of her. She was still my granddaughter, still the little girl who'd once crawled into my lap for stories. But when she walked in, I immediately sensed something was off. Her smile was too bright, her greeting too effusive. "Grandma!" I came straight from graduation. "I wanted you to be the first to see this," she exclaimed, holding out her left hand where a massive diamond caught the light. "Derek proposed right after the ceremony. Isn't it gorgeous?" I looked at the ring, then at her face flushed with excitement. No mention of the ceremony I'd missed. No acknowledgement of the fiction she'd created. Just this ring, this symbol of her entry into the Harrison family. "It's very large," I said, unable to force more enthusiasm. "I know, it was his grandmother's. The Harrisons have had it for generations." She collapsed onto my sofa, still beaming. "The wedding will be next June. Oh, and guess what? Dr. Harrison is bringing me into the family practice once I finish residency." "Can you believe it? Private practice, Grandma. No county hospital shifts for me." The words hit like slaps. County hospital shifts, like the ones I'd worked for decades, the ones that had put food on our table and kept a roof over Diana's head. "That's quite an opportunity," I managed, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I know. Mrs. Harrison says it's the perfect setup. We'll live in their guest house until we can afford our own place in the right neighborhood." The right neighborhood. Not my neighborhood with its modest homes and working-class residents. "Jessica," I said quietly, "Martha attended your graduation today." Her smile faltered for just a moment. "Oh, I didn't see her. She heard your speech about your grandmother, the cardiologist." Jessica's eyes darted away, then back to me, her expression shifting to something more calculated. "Oh, that. I was just trying to honor great-grandma Elizabeth's memory, making her part of my special day. By turning her into a doctor? When she died because we couldn't afford one?" Jessica shrugged, uncomfortable but not apologetic. "It's just a speech, Grandma. It sounds better this way. More inspiring. More impressive to the Harrisons, you mean?" She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked at me with what I realized was pity. "Grandma, you don't understand how this world works. Connections and background matter in medicine. The Harrisons are offering me everything I've worked for." I felt something harden inside me. "And what am I offering, Jessica? What have I ever offered you?" Jessica stared at me, her mouth opening slightly at my question. She recovered quickly, her expression shifting from shock to something between pity and condescension. "Grandma, of course you've offered me love and support. I didn't mean—" "What else?" I pressed, surprising even myself with my directness. "Well, you've always been there for me." "Yes, I have." I reached for my purse on the side table and pulled out my checkbook register. The small book was worn at the edges from years of careful use. "I've been there with $30,000 toward your medical school tuition." Jessica's cheeks flushed. "I appreciate that, Grandma. You know I do." "Do I? You've created a fictional grandmother who's a doctor rather than acknowledge the real one who's a nurse. The real one who helped put you through school." "That's not fair. It was just a speech. Just a way to make a point about legacies?" I interrupted. "About continuing a tradition of medicine. I have a medical tradition, too, Jessica. Not as prestigious as a cardiologist, perhaps, but I saved lives. I brought babies into this world. I sat with the dying when no one else would." She shifted uncomfortably. "I know that, Grandma, but it's different for women now. We have to position ourselves strategically." "I was strategic too," I said quietly. "When your mother was little and your grandfather left us, I strategically worked double shifts to keep a roof over our heads. When you were born, I strategically put away part of every paycheck so you could have opportunities I never had." Jessica's eyes darted toward the door, clearly wishing she could escape this conversation. "I didn't come here to argue about a speech. I came to share my good news about the engagement. An engagement to a man whose parents think less of you because your mother's side is less established," I said, echoing Mrs. Harrison's words. Her eyes widened. "You don't understand. The Harrisons have connections. Their practice is the most prestigious in the city." "I understand perfectly," I replied, setting down my checkbook register. I was surprised by how calm I felt now. "You're making choices about what you value. We all do." Jessica looked at her watch in an exaggerated gesture. "I should go. Derek's parents are hosting a dinner for us tonight." She stood, smoothing her dress. You're making this into something bigger than it is, Grandma. It's just how the world works. People care about connections and lineage. I nodded slowly. Yes, they do. I picked up one of my nursing journals from the side table. That's why I'm going to make sure my lineage isn't forgotten. Jessica frowned. What does that mean? It means I'm done being erased. I stood up, my back straight despite the weight of decades. I won't attend your wedding if you're ashamed of who I am. I won't pretend to be someone else to make your future in-laws comfortable. Grandma, I never said I was ashamed. You didn't have to say it. You showed it. Now I'm showing you where I stand. Jessica's expression hardened slightly. You're overreacting. It's just a wedding. It's not just a wedding. It's not just a speech. It's my life, my existence. I moved toward the door, opening it. I hope the Harrisons' dinner is lovely. Please give your mother my regards. She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine as if looking for the grandmother who had always yielded, always accommodated, always put her needs first. That grandmother was gone. Fine, she said finally, her voice tight. I'll call you tomorrow when you're feeling more reasonable. After she left, I sat in my living room as darkness fell, not bothering to turn on the lights. The weight of the day pressed on me from all sides. Jessica's dismissal, Diana's absence, Martha's revelation. I had lived my entire life trying to be there for my family, stepping back when needed, supporting from the shadows, never demanding recognition. And where had it gotten me? Erased, replaced with a more impressive fictional version. My phone rang several times that evening. Diana, then Jessica, then Diana again. I let each call go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear their explanations or justifications. I needed to find my own footing first. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I showered, dressed in my most professional outfit, a simple navy suit I kept for special occasions, and drove to my credit union. I'd like to discuss my accounts, I told the young woman at the desk. I'm considering making some changes to my financial plans. 2 hours later, I left with a stack of paperwork and a sense of purpose. My savings weren't vast, but they were respectable, the result of decades of careful budgeting and modest living. I had always assumed they would go to Diana and Jessica when I passed. Now I had other ideas. When I returned home, Diana's car was in my driveway. She was sitting on my porch steps, her designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, her expression a mixture of annoyance and concern. Mom, where have you been? I've been calling you since last night. I unlocked my front door without answering, gesturing for her to follow me inside. Once we were seated in the living room, she wasted no time. Getting to the point, Jessica told me you were upset about her graduation speech. Mom, you're making too big a deal out of this. It was just a nice tribute to Grandma Elizabeth, was it? I asked calmly. Or was it a convenient fiction to impress Derek's family? Diana had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. The Harrisons are very particular about pedigree. You know how these old families can be? No, I don't. I was raised by a single mother who died because we couldn't afford a doctor. I raised you alone after your father left. We don't have pedigree, Diana. We have resilience, she sighed, the sound heavy with exasperation. This is exactly why we thought it best you didn't attend. You always have to bring up the hardships, the struggles. It makes people uncomfortable. People like the Harrisons? Yes, people like them. They're offering Jessica everything. Connections, security, status. Why can't you just be happy for her instead of making this about yourself? I studied my daughter, this stranger who had once been my whole world. I am happy for Jessica's accomplishments. I'm proud of her becoming a doctor. What I'm not happy about is being erased because my existence is inconvenient to your social climbing. Diana flinched. That's not fair, Mom, isn't it? You approved of Jessica creating a fictional grandmother. You agreed I shouldn't attend the graduation. You've been embarrassed by me for years. My job, my home, my clothes. Everything I am has become something you want to hide. That's not true, Diana protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. We just want what's best for Jessica. And what's best is pretending I don't exist. Or that I'm someone else entirely. I shook my head. I won't do it anymore, Diana. I won't be your family's dirty secret. What are you saying? She asked, her voice rising slightly. I'm saying I've made some decisions about my future and about my legacy. I placed the folder from the credit union on the coffee table between us. It's time I started living for myself. Diana stared at the folder on the coffee table, her expression shifting from confusion to wariness. What kind of decisions? She asked. I took a deep breath. I've established a nursing scholarship fund. Diana blinked. A what? A scholarship for nursing students who want to work in underserved communities. I've allocated most of my savings to fund it, most of your. Diana's voice trailed off as the implications sank in. Mom, that's your retirement money. No, my pension is my retirement money. This is what I've saved over the years. Money I was planning to leave to you and Jessica someday. Diana's face paled. You can't be serious. I'm very serious. The paperwork is already signed. But why? Just because Jessica said something thoughtless in a speech? Because we wanted to spare you an uncomfortable situation at graduation? I shook my head, feeling strangely calm. This isn't about punishing anyone. It's about honoring who I am and what I've done with my life. I was a nurse for 47 years. I helped thousands of patients. That matters, Diana. It matters even if it doesn't impress people like the Harrisons. Diana leaned forward, her voice taking on the placating tone she might use with a difficult client. Of course it matters, Mom. No one is saying it doesn't. But this is an extreme reaction. Let's talk about this reasonably. I am being reasonable. For the first time in years, I'm thinking about what I want, not what everyone else expects of me. And what you want is to give away money that should go to your family, to your granddaughter who's just starting her life. Jessica has her medical degree, a wealthy fiancé, and in-laws who are bringing her into their private practice. She doesn't need my money. Diana's expression hardened. This is about Jessica joining Derek's family practice, isn't it? You're jealous that she's going to have the kind of success you never achieved. The accusation stung, but I refused to let it show. I'm not jealous, Diana. I'm disappointed. Not in Jessica's success, but in her willingness to erase who she comes from to get it. So you're punishing her, punishing both of us over hurt feelings? No, I'm creating something meaningful with what I have, something that honors the work I did instead of hiding it. Diana stood up abruptly. Richard was right about you. You've always had this chip on your shoulder about people with more advantages. Is that what Richard thinks? That I resent people with advantages? I laughed softly. I don't resent advantages, Diana. I resent ingratitude. I resent being treated as if everything I sacrificed for you and Jessica was worthless, because it wasn't prestigious enough. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you mentioned to your friends what I did for a living? When did you ever invite me to one of your dinner parties or include me in your social events? Even before the graduation, you've been pushing me to the sidelines for years. Diana was silent, her face flushed with anger or embarrassment, perhaps both. You know what hurt the most? I continued quietly. Not that Jessica made up a fictional grandmother who was a doctor. It's that neither of you thought what I actually did was worth mentioning. Diana sank back onto the couch, suddenly looking deflated. Mom, it's not that simple. It is that simple. Either you value who I am or you don't. Of course I value you, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. It's just complicated. Complicated, I repeated. Yes, I suppose it is complicated to balance your desire for status with the reality of where you come from. Diana didn't respond immediately. She stared at her hands for a long moment, then looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. The Harrisons are hosting an engagement dinner next weekend, she said finally. They want to meet Jessica's extended family. I waited, sensing there was more. Richard thought. We thought it might be better if you didn't attend. Given how upset you are about everything. There it was. Another exclusion, another erasure. I see, I said, my voice steady despite the fresh wave of hurt. And what will you tell them? That I'm ill? Out of town? Or will Jessica tell them her inspirational grandmother is already dead? Mom, please. No, Diana. I want to know. How will you explain my absence to people who are supposedly going to be Jessica's new family? Diana stood, again gathering her purse. I don't know, Mom. I don't know, Mom. The entitlement I'd seen there a year ago had been replaced by something else. Humility, perhaps? Genuine respect. "What about your mother?" I asked. "Does she know you're here?" Jessica's expression clouded. "Mom and we're not in a great place right now. She doesn't understand why I broke things off with Derek. She says I'm throwing my life away." A small, sad smile. Sound familiar? It did, all too familiar. The cycle was repeating itself. "And the wedding?" "Cancelled," Jessica said, firmly. "I couldn't go through with it, not with everything I was questioning about my life." I nodded, taking this in. "I'm sorry things have been difficult." "Don't be sorry, Grandma. Be proud. Your journals saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I came here today to ask if you'd consider letting me volunteer at your scholarship foundation. I want to help. I want to be part of your legacy, your real legacy." For the first time in over a year, I felt the hard knot of hurt in my chest begin to loosen. "I'd like that very much, Jessica." As we sat there, hands clasped across the table, I realized that sometimes being erased from one story means you're free to write a better one that honors who you truly are and what you've truly done. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those who once tried to erase you might find their way back to the truth. The entitlement I'd seen there a year ago had been replaced by something else. Humility, perhaps? Genuine respect. "What about your mother?" I asked. "Does she know you're here?" Jessica's expression clouded. "Mom and we're not in a great place right now. She doesn't understand why I broke things off with Derek. She says I'm throwing my life away." A small, sad smile. Sound familiar? It did, all too familiar. The cycle was repeating itself. "And the wedding?" "Cancelled," Jessica said, firmly. I couldn't go through with it, not with everything I was questioning about my life. I nodded, taking this in. "I'm sorry things have been difficult." "Don't be sorry, Grandma. Be proud. Your journals saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life." She reached across the table and took my hand. "I came here today to ask if you'd consider letting me volunteer at your scholarship foundation. I want to help. I want to be part of your legacy, your real legacy." For the first time in over a year, I felt the hard knot of hurt in my chest begin to loosen. "I'd like that very much, Jessica." As we sat there, hands clasped across the table, I realized that sometimes being erased from one story means you're free to write a better one that honors who you truly are and what you've truly done. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those who once tried to erase you might find their way back to the truth. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows of the community health clinic, casting a warm glow over the examination room where I was organizing supplies. At 77, my hands weren't as steady as they once were, but they still knew their purpose. "Grandma Eleanor?" Jessica's voice called from the doorway. "The students are here." I turned to see my granddaughter, now in her final year of her community medicine fellowship, clipboard in hand. Her face had matured in these 5 years, less of the polished perfection she once cultivated, more of the authentic confidence that comes from doing work that matters. "Send them in," I said, straightening my volunteer badge. The small group of nursing students filed in, eyes bright with the mixture of nervousness and excitement I recognized from my own training days. This semester marked the 5th year of our mentorship program, a collaboration between the Eleanor Dawson Nursing Scholarship Fund and the Community Medicine Department, where Jessica now taught part-time. "Everyone," Jessica began, "this is Eleanor Dawson, the founder of your scholarship program and my grandmother. She'll be sharing some insights from her 47 years as a nurse." I smiled at the introduction, so different from the fictional grandmother Jessica had once invented. Now she spoke my name with pride, acknowledging both our relationship and my work without embellishment or apology. As I began sharing stories with the students, real stories from my journals about real patients in real circumstances, I thought about how much had changed since that painful day when Jessica had asked me not to attend her graduation. The scholarship fund now supported 5 students annually, with Marisol Hernandez, our first recipient, serving as the program coordinator after completing her BSN. The mentorship program had become a model for other community health initiatives, pairing experienced nurses with medical and nursing students to provide care in underserved areas. Diana had taken longer to come around. For nearly 2 years after Jessica broke her engagement, my daughter had maintained a cool distance, still mourning the connections and status she'd lost when the Harrison alliance dissolved. But when Richard left her for his younger assistant, Diana had found herself needing to rebuild her life with a new set of values. Now she volunteered at the clinic's front desk once a week, her administrative skills proving valuable in navigating insurance issues for patients. We were still rebuilding our relationship, one conversation at a time, but at least we were having those conversations. After the students left, Jessica and I walked to the small cafe across from the clinic for our weekly lunch. Dr. Michaels offered me a permanent position on the faculty, Jessica said as we settled at our usual table by the window. I'd still see patients at the clinic, but I'd be teaching community medicine half-time. That's wonderful news, I said, genuinely pleased. Jessica had found her calling in teaching the next generation of doctors to look beyond prestige and profit to the human needs of their communities. I've been thinking about something else too, she continued, a hint of nervousness in her voice. I'm considering adding some funding to the Scholarship Foundation. My portion of Dad's investment portfolio matured, and I want it to go somewhere meaningful. I nodded, touched by the gesture. The foundation would be grateful. There's one condition, though. Jessica smiled. I want to rename it. Rename it? I raised an eyebrow. To what? The Eleanor and Jessica Dawson Healthcare Scholarship Fund. She reached across the table to take my hand. I want to be part of your legacy, Grandma. Not by erasing you or replacing you, but by standing beside you. Tears pricked at my eyes. Not the bitter tears of betrayal I'd shed 5 years ago, but tears of quiet joy. The legacy I'd fought to preserve had not only survived, it had grown into something larger than myself. I'd be honored, I said simply. As we sat there, 3 generations of Dawson women now aligned in purpose instead of divided by pretense, I thought about how legacy isn't what others say about you after you're gone. It's the truth of what you've done and who you've helped along the way. My name might never grace the halls of prestigious hospitals or appear in medical journals, but it would live on in the nurses and doctors we trained, in the patients they cared for, and in the granddaughter who had found her way back to what truly mattered. Some legacies aren't visible to everyone, but to those who need them most, to the students finding their path, to the patients receiving compassionate care, to the families healing old wounds, these legacies shine like beacons, illuminating what matters most in a world too often blinded. By appearances, my legacy was never invisible. It just needed the right eyes to see it.